members of the Board of Finance that are online are Lorene Pesky, Jim Wright, Chris Bayes, Lance Boynton, and Christopher Anderson. I know that Mark Bushka had indicated that he was not going to be able to make this meeting this evening. So I think we have our full contingent. Item number, for the record, this is a special meeting of the Board of Finance. It is Thursday, June 11th, 2020, and we have only one item on the agenda aside from public comment, so I'll jump right in. Carol, I'm not sure, were there any public comments that needed to be read into the record?
Yes, Mayor, we have two.
Yeah.
Shall I start?
Two, okay.
The first one, the first one was received yesterday from Laura Watson. She didn't list an address, so I'm not sure if she's from Torrington, but it sounds like it. Her letter reads, "Dear Council and Board of Finance, I am writing this letter to you to express my utter disappointment in the lack of due diligence you have exercised in approving the school board request to create a building committee and submit a grant application for a building project, not the least of which is the decision to allow the school board to serve as the building committee, akin to putting the kids in charge of the candy store. Now, there is no private sector or taxpayer oversight that can vet the project or push back on the wants versus needs that will cost the taxpayers $156 million. Even with a reimbursement rate of 62%, the cost to the taxpayers with interest over a 20-year term will be over $106 million. Good school construction planning starts with the development of a long-range plan for the entire school system. The documented projection for enrollment in Torrington Public Schools is that there will continue to be a decline, partly due to the reduced birth rates in the city and partly a result of school choice. This alone would be a clear indication that you should be reviewing the district-wide needs before approving a new school construction. Good school construction planning also requires city legislative approval of an appropriation of funds for the preparation of working drawings and specifications. When did the City Council or the Board of Finance approve that appropriation? If the city did not appropriate the funds, how was the architectural firm paid? You were elected to ask the important questions, questions most people wouldn't know to ask. You have a responsibility to help the taxpayers understand the impact of this project. What is the true cost of the project, and can we truly afford it? While everyone is wringing their hands over a 1/4 mill rate increase, nobody asked about the 3 mill increase this project will cost. Your approval of this project is a signal to taxpayers that a mill rate of 50 is acceptable, is something we can afford. More shocking than everything is the proposal that the existing building is going to be demolished. What about the $1 million the taxpayers just paid 2 years ago to replace the elevator at the high school? What about the $14 million of school renovations that were done only 20 years ago? Are the taxpayers still paying for that bond? When the roof on your house needs replacing, do you demo the entire house or build a new one? Can we as taxpayers afford to throw $15 million away like that? As I listened to the presentation, we were repeatedly told that everyone on the council had been invited to participate in the planning meetings, yet clearly no members attended. If the council did not approve the appropriation to pay for the concept plans, did the council or board members fully comprehend how far along the school board was in development of this proposal? When no elected officials showed up to the invitation-only event, why didn't the school board request a joint meeting with the entire council? Why weren't there periodic presentations to the city boards and the public before being asked at the 11th hour during a pandemic with a gun to your heads to approve the grant application and a referendum? Once again, it is only Councilman Cavagnero who asks the important questions. What is the plan for educating our future generation? What is going to happen with the elementary schools? How will this new building improve test scores? Other questions that should have been asked. Shouldn't the voters know what the long-range plan is for our buildings before going to the referendum? If the plan is to close a school or two, When will that plan be disclosed? According to the State Department of Education school profiles, Forbes School grades 4 and 5 enrollment is 360 students. Southwest School grades 4 and 5 enrollment is 300 students. If you move all grades 4 and 5 students to the middle school, 660 students, why would we need those 2 elementary schools? How long does the school board think it will take to attract the 660 students they hope will move to Torrington to fill up those 2 schools? If a school or 2 will be closed, what is the city going to do with the buildings? I urge you to rescind your vote on this matter and ask the school board to pursue the proper school construction process of developing the long-range plan for the entire school system first and publicly over the next year. Laura Watson. Yeah. If you will not rescind that vote, I urge you to schedule a referendum date on the November ballot to ensure that all of the voters and taxpayers of Torrington have an opportunity to vote on this important matter. Our second message is from Kimberly Petzel from Oxbow Drive to the Board of Finance. I hope the board votes unanimously in favor of bonding for the school project. We need a new school. A new school will attract people to Torrington to be a part of the revitalization we have been working on for so long. It will also encourage people to keep their children in our schools, keeping taxpayer money here. Local money follows almost every student who lives in Torrington, but is educated elsewhere. We need to keep that taxpayer money here. Like an old car which has served well, but has become too expensive to maintain, the present high school has come to the end of its useful life. Something has to be done. Bringing the present building up to modern standards and requirements will be expensive. But if all we do is fix the present building, state money will not help. Building a new high school will make us eligible for state money at a reimbursement rate of at least 62%, though a much higher rate is possible given our status as an alliance district. Given the current situation, the time to act is now. State reimbursement rates are unlikely to get any higher and will likely go and stay lower in the future, making a new school more expensive. A new building will not only serve our educational needs better, but will also be more efficient and save us money on energy and maintenance.
Okay, you said that was it, just the 2?
Yes, that's all.
Good, okay, all right. Thank you, Carol. All right, moving into item number 2. I'll entertain a motion, and just because, as a reminder, mostly for me than you, I do have to do this by a roll call vote. I'll entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 143-203, authorizing an appropriation of $159,575,000 for the construction of a new high school, a new middle school, and a new central administrative office, and the demolition of the existing Torrington High School, and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the city and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $159,575,000. Therefore, and recommend approval of resolution number 143-204 to the Board of Councilmen. Do I have a motion?
Oh, Anderson, move for discussion.
Thank you.
I'll second that. Right.
All right, so motion by Christopher Anderson, seconded by Jim Wright. All right, and for the board members, I know Board of Education Superintendent Lebonsky is on the line, and I think Fiona Capabianca, Board Chair, is on the line. So questions?
Yes, can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm very much in favor of the referendum and the input of the city taxpayers. But I have some questions about the September 22nd date. Is there some deadline that is mandating that date? That's the first question. Second question is, how much was that going to cost? And I'd also like to know if we have any sense of what the state procedure is going to be for voting, if people can go to the polls at that time. If not, are absentee ballots going to be printed up, and who's responsible for that? And wouldn't it be a better turnout, a more reflective of the taxpayers of all the city if it was held on the election date of November 5th? Those are my-
Right, so I will, going to refer the first question, which is why the September 22nd date, to Board of Education. I don't know if Fiona or Sue, you wanna unmute yourself if you can? So I see you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. She's trying. In the meantime, let me try to answer some of the other questions. With regard to Carol, or is John, somebody has to unmute Sue and Fiona. Your question regarding the process, I mean, with regard to the state, whether or not they, what the future elections are going to look like. As you know, they're trying to deal with how they're going to proceed with an August primary. And Carol Anderson, do you want to talk a little bit about what the state is asking and looking at?
I'm sorry, I was looking for Fiona. I couldn't see her. Sue Lubansky is unmuted. So
Okay.
we're talking about the primary? I thought we were talking about the referendum. But in either.
No, I'm talking about the voting procedures, because the question that Mr. Wright was asking is, what are the procedures going to look like for accessibility to a polling place while we're still under this pandemic response?
Okay, I'm sorry. So yeah, our polls, we have a safe polls plan on file with the Secretary of the State. And we're very confident that all the polls will be open. For a referendum, we'd only need one polling place, not all 8 in September. There's going to be social distancing, there's going to be disinfecting, there's going to be face shields, plastic screens. We're very confident in the safety of our polls for those who choose to go that route. Those who do not, for the primary, every eligible voter will be mailed an application from a mailing house in Rhode Island by the Secretary of the State. The registrar's office here and myself are going to do our due diligence with every one of those applications to make sure that there's no voter fraud. We can compare signatures, and that's the plan. And then we enter it into a system here, and they will be mailing out ballots from Rhode Island. And if it gets too close to the voting date, we feel that it'll take too long to get to the people from Rhode Island, we're going to take care of it in-house. And we'll also have a ballot drop box outside, like a mailbox, like a FedEx box, so that if people didn't want to come in the building, they could pop their ballot in there. Did I answer your question?
For Jim.
Well, I still sense that some people may not want to go to polls for whatever health reason, and they would have absentee ballots. So that somewhat answers it, yes. Thanks.
Okay. So now on the cost, when you asked about what it would cost, and I know that when we had the joint meeting, I mentioned, off the top of my head that it would be about $30,000. Just to give you a breakdown of what it is. The one polling place we would be looking at would be about $10,000 to set up with volunteers and the printing of the ballots and all of the operations of that one polling place. The mailing, when we did our mailing a couple of years ago for the referendum on the streets and other infrastructure, that mailing was about $13,000. And then, of course, we have legal fees. Attorney Dawson from Pullman and Conley has been instrumental in helping us get to this point with resolutions and making sure that we're hitting all the marks to keep this on target, and Bill Lindsley. So that's what comprised the $30,000 number that I gave you. So regardless of when this election were to occur, the mailing and the legal fees and financial advice fees would be incurred regardless. So it's technically only the $10,000 for the one polling place that would come into play with a standalone referendum. So the Fiona and Susan Lebonski.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So
Okay, sorry about that.
no, you're fine.
So the September 22nd date, there's a couple of reasons when looking into all of this. An issue as important as this, we feel should not be put onto the back of a ballot with a presidential election. And they recommend that school construction project referendums are standalone referendums so that people are really able to get all the information and make a really good educated decision without all the noise of a regular municipal election, and especially in a presidential year. It becomes even more cumbersome to do that. So this would be a separate issue that would be a focused, targeted, specific referendum. It's a, you know, in all scenarios, this is a lot of money, and the town really needs to focus and make a decision on whether they want to go this route or not, rather than it getting buried in a presidential election. They said a lot of people on the presidential election ballot won't even fill out the referendum question. So that's a concern about hearing from the bulk of people in Torrington as far as what they really want to do relative to a new high school. So that's our thought process.
Thank you. Did that answer all your questions? I know you rattled off a few, Mr. Wright.
There's no deadline or anything that they're trying to meet, and that's why they have the September date.
Yeah.
No, there's no deadline for the referendum. There's not a deadline for the date for the referendum.
We just have to have it before that legislative session begins.
Right.
Before December 31st, I think, is actually when we must have that referendum.
Correct.
Okay.
My concern.
I meant before the municipal election. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
My reaction is that a presidential election, you're going to get many, many more people to the polls, and even if they don't see the referendum, you're going to have a higher percentage of eligible voters show up, and I really think it needs to be representative. I don't know what the numbers are on a single referendum, but I'm guessing it's way under 50%. But
yeah, it's Chris Bates as well. I don't know if Mr. Wright's done.
yes, Chris, thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree with him. I think that from not only a data standpoint where we get a more accurate read of and more people participating at the polls, I also think it's a safety thing. I think it's a safer option. Do this in November and have one single time where everybody goes out and gets that done. So I echo Mr. Wright's thoughts as far as that. My only other question is, I guess, just going back to the building committee. The council did vote to establish a building committee, right, Mayor? Just in regards
Yes.
to that letter that was read aloud earlier. I just want to make sure that's clear. And in my, I want to be clear to the building committee that if there's any cost savings, in this project that can come along and through business and construction inputs from all over the place, obviously we'd like to see the cost of this project come down wherever it can. I do think it's important, and I think that it is a good investment to make. But I think that the building committee should really look at the cost on this project and try to make it as affordable as they can while still delivering a great product for our kids and for the city. So that's all. I do recommend this is on the November ballot, though.
So,
Mayor,
and if
this
I
is
may,
Sue.
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sue.
No, I'm so hard on the Zoom. Just if we did do it in September, that does just get us moving faster on this project. were able to respond, were able to get this to the state and move us forward and put us in a good position. The board is paying for the referendum, so that wouldn't be a concern. And so, as Fiona said, we really feel like September would be the best time to really focus on our one issue and then pull that aside from of the there that is involved in a presidential election. So just once again, the board would be paying for the referendum, that 10,000 that you were talking about.
Thank you. Yeah. And Chris, Chris Bayes, I do want to clarify. You asked if the council did appoint a building committee. The council appointed the Board of Education to serve as the building committee. And the reason that the recommendation to do so was because, as you know, with this pandemic, there was, some lag time trying to put this before the council so that action could be taken before June 30th, getting some mixed messages as to whether or not there was going to be an extension of that June 30th deadline. And it quickly came to the point where if we were to attempt to appoint a different building committee than the Board of Education, there would not have been sufficient time for that building committee to review anything that the Board of Education and their ad hoc committee had been doing for the past 2 years. So just so that this board is also well aware of exactly what happened, who is the statutory building committee? It is the Board of Education. And the state law allows us to do that. And the only one additional requirement in establishing a building committee is that at least one member of that building committee have a background in construction or contracting. And as we all know, board member Gary Euclidou is a contractor. So when we really came down to this, this really tight timeline, after giving it a lot of thought and having a couple of conversations with Mr. Aram and the chairwoman of the board, I felt it was a reasonable step to take under the circumstances. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And my message is still the same to them then. Obviously, they did a lot of work and a lot of hard work so far on this project. And I know they did. They worked for a long time on it. So my message is still just the same to them. Let's try to hone this down and really make it something that, is affordable at the same time as it's beautiful. I know it can be done. I've seen it done, and I'm confident that they can get that done. But so same comment goes to them as the building committee.
Thank you. Mr. Boynton.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the kickoff, but reviewing, to be honest, I got a huge sticker shock on this. When I look at the average price that it costs to build a high school in New England, it's about $45 million. When we look at the average cost to build a middle school, it's about $26 million. If we're talking $300 a square foot, and that's coastal Massachusetts to build a high school, I'm stuck with this $160 million. Everything that I'm looking at should come in half of that. So on that initial proposal, did they talk about where these additional costs are coming from?
Sue or Fiona, do you want to field that?
I'm
never-
curious as to what renovations you're looking at that cost $45 million. Is it $45 million the taxpayer portion? I've never seen a high school, and we looked in multiple states that have ever been built for $45 million.
That's you can Google that. That's the average cost.
No.
Okay,
I'm
we
not
had
sure about Googling. We've looked at specific renovation projects and new construction projects.
Yeah, well, I guess that's my question is, unfortunately, like I said, I wasn't able to, I had a family obligation and couldn't make the kickoff. But like I said, when I'm going through the proposals, A, B, and C here, when I'm looking at new construction, and it was 84,000 square feet at $300,000 per square foot, that comes in at 80 million. But yet the proposal's for twice that. So is it 80 million for the new building and 80 million of taking down the old building?
No, Lance, if you look at the cost comparisons, just to do the maintenance on the building would cost us 112 million, just in terms of everything that needs to be done. You have to remember this building
$100 a
is,
square foot.
okay, let me just finish. So this building is 60 years old. So the actual walls, windows, pipes, everything in the guts of the building are falling apart, to be blunt. And so that would just be the maintenance. And on that, your reimbursement would only be the 33.9 million. So Torrington's share would be at 78 million. So these things are already starting to fail in the building. So when you look at the new construction, these items, which Ken Biega from O&G reviewed in the kickoff, as you say, to go through all of these, the specs and how much it would cost. And we can have Ken come back and speak to you if you feel like you need to. But certainly these are not exorbitant prices for a new construction. They do this all the time. O&G is known for their evaluations of construction. That's why they're so successful across the state. So he really worked those financials for us so that we could have an accurate representation and a number to present.
Right, and if when I look at that proposal and I look at the new construction, the square foot of the new construction, and I multiply that by the price per square foot provided on the proposal, that's half the cost.
Well, this is Fiona. Are you looking at not municipal construction? Because municipal construction, we're subject, well, for municipal construction, we're subject to prevailing wage, which doesn't happen in private structure construction. So I don't know, it's very difficult to answer when we don't know what you're comparing it to.
I'm
So if you're
looking
looking
at
at
O&G
another,
draft conceptual design estimate, new school building, 284,295 square feet at $293 a square foot. So when I do the math, that's half of $160 million. So if the new building is 80 million, is it 80 million to take down the old building?
We have, this is Ed Aram. We have, if we can unmute Ken Biega, who did it from O&G. I think he's on the line. I don't know what, Lance, you're looking at, but they've done 100 projects throughout the state of Connecticut. That's why we have them doing the budget. Also in the budget is, you know, once you have to take down the building, it has asbestos, demolition of it. Also, there's in the soft cost, there's furniture, there's other items. I think we gave you a 3-page list of it. So I you know, it's difficult to talk when I don't have your figures with us. But this throughout Connecticut, that's the going rate of what's happening in Connecticut. Maybe Massachusetts is a little cheaper, probably not, but if you're looking at Arkansas or something else, it's cheaper. This is what O&G does on a continuing basis. That's why we have them to look at it, because they've done over 100 projects in Connecticut. Mainly, they're doing newer projects now because it's fiscally responsible to do a new project rather than a renovator's new to an old building that's 60 or 70 years old, which is happening in many parts of the Connecticut.
I fully understand that, and I'm familiar with O&G. Like I said, I'm just looking at the paperwork provided, and when I look at the numbers, when I look at $300 a square foot, I don't come up with 159 million. I come up with half of that. So I'm just trying to, like I said, unfortunately, I was able to be here for the kickoff. So I'm just trying to get an understanding of, out of 159, okay, 80 is new construction for one of the proposals. Where's the other 80?
Ed, do you know what number Ken is on so that they can unmute him?
I don't have it in front of me. Boy. If Brian, if you can,
Yeah,
tell me
hi,
his
it's,
number.
it's Brian. It's 307
You're done.
985.
You're unmuted. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. It's Brian from Castle Booze. Ken Biega's number is the 860-307-9851. That you, Ken?
That's me.
There we
Okay,
go.
thanks. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay, you can hear me. Okay. Yeah. So let me answer a couple questions. First of all, what you're looking at, the 293, that is what we consider the hard construction cost. All right. So you'd have to go down and look at the bottom line because you need to add in the escalation, contingencies, owner soft costs, and all that to get to your overall price. So actually, so that's the reason. No, it's not $80 million or whatever to demolish the existing building. Now, especially at this type, since this is conceptual design level, what we do is we go back and of course, we have a various square foot cost for the different trades, whether it's concrete, whether it's site work, whether it's HVAC and plumbing. And we use current costs because we just, built a new Grasso Tech. We built the new Guilford High School. We're building some new schools in Groton and a middle school. So we have the current square foot numbers. And we've done 40 projects with Castle Booze, so we know how they design a project. So we take that all into consideration and we plug in those square foot cost numbers to establish our bare construction cost.
Right.
And then we look at, okay, when you're going to bid it, what is different, because we have demolition, so we add that in. And then it comes back to this being a new building, you have soft costs, which is, new technology, you have legal costs, you have bonding costs, you have architectural fees, you have all that stuff. So when you approve this as a city, it covers all your costs entirely for the project.
So what is the cost per square foot then?
It's up in the $500 range. It's if I remember correctly, I don't have it in front of me, $545 a square foot. And that is the going rate for schools in Connecticut right now, if not more. So, and then just to remind everybody, we still have to bid this project out. Just because the taxpayers approve it, you still have to go through the whole process, estimate, the architect goes through different design phases. And as that progresses, your construction manager will estimate this project, and then it goes out to competitive bids. And you, as taxpayers, can see copies of all the bids because they're all publicly opened. So you will get the best number you can at bid time.
Well, I think for the referendum, that needs to be extremely clear.
Okay.
Because, again, when I'm looking through this, when I look at construction costs, with your numbers, it doesn't have all of that extra stuff that you just mentioned on there. And again, just a simple review of different school buildings in the last 10 years, very, very different findings for this area. And you bring up a great point, and that's something, when the Board of Ed puts together the flyer and we do more, public presentations, that stuff can be, identified, and we can show those comparable schools and what they came in for cost per square foot and the overall project cost on that. Yep. No, it's a great idea. Yeah, I appreciate the clarification. Like I said, just a little sticker shock on what I was thinking compared to where the numbers came in. To be honest, it's more than twice what I was thinking.
Yeah, okay.
While they have Ed or Sue or Brian, Ed, you mentioned that there was a 3-page document that was provided to the boards. I was trying to do a quick search on my email to see if that was something that I can send to the boards again.
I've never seen it.
Just for their information.
Yeah, for the record, I've never seen that either.
Is that-
Hi, it's Brian. We could, Ken, I think you're referring to Ken's the summary, right, for the estimate? Is that what you're thinking of, Mayor?
I don't know. Ed Aaron mentioned that he sent a 3-page document that had a breakdown.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering if there was something that broke that down a little bit better to answer Mr. Boynton's question.
Yeah, this is Sue Lebomsky. We'll make sure that we get that to you.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. The floor is still open. Other questions or comments? Mr. Wright.
Can I follow up the number doesn't concern me so much because that's what the referendum would decide. That's why I'm so hung up on when the dating is. But when we had the presentation with Castle Bowes, they ran through PowerPoint and they had slides. And one of the things they mentioned was they did a school, I think it was in Massachusetts, where it was 2 buildings. One building was a technical school and one was a high school. And I'm just wondering if it was ever considered for this project, especially since there's money already on the table for the high school, the trade school rather. Just wondering if that was ever considered. Just curious on that.
Yeah, this is Sue Lebomsky. I can start on that. We actually did consider it, and we met with Jeff Whitby, who's the superintendent of technical schools. We also met with Keith Norton from the State Department, because we thought that would have been a great idea, and we loved the idea of that project. And basically, we were turned down because they said that there are 2 different pots of money, because technical schools are paid for by the state and boards of ed are obviously separate entities. So they were not willing to commingle those funds, but they did encourage us to have our students take classes over there because they're so close, and they would like to avail themselves of some of the opportunities that we have at the high school. So we'll continue to develop those relationships. However, we had a whole proposal. It was called The Tale of 2 High Schools, and it was a beautiful brochure, and we still have it, but the concept is history at this point. It was part of our 2-year process that we went through.
That's too bad. Thank you.
I agree with you, Jim.
So the floor is still open on the motion. Are there
Lorraine?
Hi, Lorraine. Go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. In terms of the community member who brought up the building committee, is there a mechanism for additional members to either be appointed by the Board of Ed or to include additional members of the community as participants on the building committee?
So, there's a appointment of the building committee. There was just some statutory requirements that I had to, I had to make sure that we were hitting those highlights. I would say yes, and I would think that the Board of Education would even welcome additional participants. Ms. Pesky, as you know, earlier in the year when we were first started to try to bring these things forward, I actually reached out to members of the community to see if they would be interested in serving on this committee. It was tricky in a pandemic. People are reluctant to serve. Conflicts of interest were some of the problems. A Board of Finance member can't serve on that kind of a committee. If somebody might think they're in the vendor supply chain, they don't want to be on that committee. But I don't want to speak for the Board of Education, but perhaps Fiona can answer as to whether or not there's an opportunity to have some kind of public participation that becomes even a part of the decision making on that. What are your thoughts?
Yes,
Fiona?
no, I can. We absolutely feel wholeheartedly that this is a community project. This is not a Board of Education sole project. We actually have some members of some other city boards. We have someone from Planning and Zoning that is interested in serving. We have a member of Board of Finance who's not there tonight, but is interested in serving. So yes, we absolutely want as much input as possible because this is going to be a community high school, a focal point of our town, and we really need the input of all stakeholders so that at the end, we're not addressing a lot of these things. So to us, it's critical that members of the community are involved in this process.
Thank you, Fiona. And I'll just remind you, Board of Finance members can't serve on that committee. it's written on our charter that the Board of Finance members cannot serve on any other board or committee in the city. So just a quick FYI. Otherwise, Ms. Pesky would have been on that board, on that committee. So the floor is
Okay,
still
but we're
yours.
still take input from anyone on the Board of Finance.
Absolutely, yes, yep.
Yes, I have, the language of the actual resolution itself includes the word new in front of middle school. And it jumped out at me when I first read it, when John sent it to us. And I believe that in paying attention to what folks have been saying out in the community, that obviously will be something that will need to be explained, that we're not, and it doesn't say clearly, the resolution doesn't say we're not destroying the middle school. The middle school will still be in existence, and that part of the presentation to the community will be how are the other school buildings going to be used or not used. You know, we know we have East School out there as a challenge for the city and the schools to maintain or to continue to use. So that's just something that I think we're going to have to make sure that we pay a lot of attention to, explaining that the middle school will still be something, because it is one of our newer facilities, although it's not new anymore.
Right.
Lorraine, just to answer that, so once we got through this week's meeting and Monday's meeting, we're going to start doing community forums, even if they have to be through Zoom right away, to start getting all of this information out, answering questions, getting people to understand the full scope of what this means for Torrington, not just for the renovation project, but for the next 5 to 10 years, what this is going to really look like in totality for all of our schools.
And Mayor, were you able to find anything out about having to word it that way?
Yeah, so Attorney Dawson is actually online, and I unmuted you, Sandy, if you wanted to address the question. Sandra and I spoke this afternoon, and I posed the question about the term new middle school. So Sandy, can you sign on?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay. So, in consultation with the Board of Ed, my understanding is that, their new middle school is actually, I believe, going to be grades 5 and 6. But it is, everyone's coming from the old middle school over to this new one, and it is new construction. So that's pretty much the simplest answer.
And I don't know, this is more of a question to Fiona and Sue. I think that Ms. Pesky is correct. There's some confusion. It's a 7-8 middle school. The middle school, which is called the middle school upon Middle School Drive, is a 4-5-6. Is it possible that this actually is going to be a junior high school, or is there another name we can give
Correct.
this? Yeah.
That's correct. So the 4-5-6 would be the intermediate school, and then 7-8 would be a junior high school.
We'll have to rename that road. All right.
Thanks. I have one more. I'm just hoping that the inclusion of administrative offices for the Board of Ed in this construction project doesn't preclude our continuing to work together towards sharing services. I think it's an excellent idea, because we also know that Midgeon Avenue is in great need of a lot of work, and is kind of past its life as being with a lot of Band-Aids that we keep using over there. But I don't want us to stop looking at what we can possibly do together between the city and the Board of Ed, and sharing services going forward. And those were my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions or comments.
Mayor, just go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, you go ahead.
One of the letters to us this evening also spoke about the possibility of additional money in terms of reimbursement from the state on this project because we are an Alliance district. And I thought that we had discussed that previously and that there wasn't anything additional because Torrington is an Alliance district.
That is correct. There is not additional funds or a discount or reimbursement, increased reimbursement because we're Alliance district. We clarified that. Castle Blues was able to clarify that in the last presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Now I'm done. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks. Just a quick note to Fiona. Fiona, if really I'd like to see here some community stakeholders be on this building committee, and I'm sure that's something that you're looking at, but I'd really like to see, we appreciate the work the board's done so far and they're going to continue to do, but I really like to see a few other people who really kind of go into the next phase of this and kind of have their input heard, whether it's taxpayers, whether it's, business leaders, whatever it has been. I know there have been some involved in the beginning phases, but just when it comes down to this time now where we're talking about bonding, we're talking about a referendum, that more of those people are involved, and I'm sure you guys will do that, but I guess that's just my final note. Thank you.
So, and to the point, for those of you that have served on building committees in the past, I think you know who you are. These building committees usually, because they go for many years, you see the timeline for this project. It's a 4-year timeline. So those building committees usually do change over time. And I can certainly work with Fiona to see if there's some way for us after all of this, the rush of getting these decisions and these procedural things put to bed, to talk about what that permanent building committee would look like. That's something we could do. Right now, we just really need to get this thing moved along so that the grant application can be filed. And I pose that almost as a question to Fiona.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, all the next steps will come once we get through these stages.
Yeah.
But we absolutely plan on involving as many members of the community through forums, some members on the building committee. We need to hear really what everyone would like to see and envision the project to be.
Great. Mr. Boynton.
Something just popped into my head based on, again, the public comment, talking about the trend in enrollment. One of the things that we have seen just in Connecticut, New England in general, is relatively an aging population and people moving out of the Northeast and so forth. Maybe this is a question for either Fiona or Sue, but do you have a basic understanding of what a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year projection for a total student enrollment? Kind of what's your plan? How many students are you thinking?
Yeah, Lance, this is Sue Lebomsky. We had NESDEC do our enrollment evaluation, and they did it over the next 5 years. And when we brought those numbers to the state, they told us that the 1,571 was the number that we should be working with. They helped us set the number in terms of the enrollment. It's something that they have to be a part of as we go through this process. If they think that we're too high or too low, they will ask us to adjust it. So they looked at the NASDAQ numbers with us, and that was on February 7th of this year. And then we moved forward using that number that the state approved.
Okay, so taking that number and then kind of tying it back into the building plan. So you really are kind of thinking that 180 square feet per student between the two schools.
That's a conversation for you and Ken Biega. He's the numbers guy in terms of the division there. I can tell you what our enrollment number is that the state has approved. So Ken would have to jump into the other piece of things.
Okay, yeah, again, I'm just trying to put all the pieces together here.
Yep, we are always going by the state and state approvals, and that's what moves us forward. Ken, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so can you repeat that question again? I'm sorry.
Lance,
hear me?
you want to go ahead? Peter?
Yeah, so based off of the 1571 student projection, so are you planning about 180 square feet per student for the two buildings?
Yeah, so, well, it varies. So the high school, you get the 181, 180 square feet, 180.2 square feet.
Yeah.
In the middle school, you get less per those kids. The square
Right.
footage is greater for the high school, and it's, I think if I remember correctly, it's roughly about 154 per student at the middle school level. So that's how the adjustment's made per square footage, and then that ties back to the state, requirements. So we kind of work with those, those in tying it back to the population of the two, the middle school or the high school.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Those are exactly the same numbers that I have on my little spreadsheet here. So that's why I was
Yep.
just trying to get an understanding of the total cost, kind of going back to what the population is, what the square foot per student is, what an anticipated cost, and just trying to get some transparency around some of those numbers.
No, those are all great questions. So you have a better understanding. And I wish, besides boring everyone to death, going over all this stuff, but then they get the glazed look in their eyes after a while. But yeah, this is, a lot of stuff that goes into and how the state looks at these issues.
Would
You
that
know-
information be in that 3-page pamphlet that Mr. Aaron was talking about?
No, it wouldn't
No.
be, because we kind of just summarize that stuff. So we could have to, go over that with you, and it ties back to Castle Blues, the square footage of the buildings and everything, and how that all comes out. Yep.
So, and I can forward to you that NASDAQ report that the Board of Education was using. But I would also add anecdotally, some of the surprises in this pandemic is the city of Torrington ended up being the 10th most forward location for mail out of New York City, an indication that there were a vast number of families that were moving in the area.
Get the
And
license plates.
yeah, it's so true. And in our neighborhood, actually, a house sale that fell through in the end of March was put back on the market and sold within 2 weeks. And yes, it was sold to a New York person who was looking to relocate to the area. We had a teletown hall with our realtors earlier in the week, and what we were hearing is that there is a real heightened demand for houses in the city of Torrington, that they're put on the market on Monday and they're under contract by Friday. A couple of times where the purchaser never stepped foot in the house, a couple of times where they ended up in a bidding war and actually brought in more than than the asking price. But the biggest surprise was that these are first-time house buyers. So even though we have this historical look at our enrollment projections, and the prospective projections based on birth rate, this pandemic may change all of that. So, their numbers, and I think to Superintendent Lebomsky's point, where the state was saying, pick a number and stick to it, and I think we'll be okay with that.
Yeah, and Mayor, if I could just add, when we spoke with the state, they also said, because we were really advocating and saying to them, if we build this new high school, more students will stay within their neighborhood school and stay in town and go to Torrington High School. And they said, but we're still going to work with this number. So they were not willing to give us increased student enrollment. So we did entertain that fact, which was very similar and great news that we have families moving into town. We hope that is the continued trend. But the state, in their wisdom and them being able to see projects day after day, week after week, they give us that number, even with that caveat that we're going to have more students because it's a new construction, new building, new opportunities. So that was their perspective.
All right. Mr. Anderson.
Hi there. I'm sorry, I'm on a different machine, so I apologize if the mic doesn't pick up well. But, you know, we've definitely gone into a lot of detail that I think it's worth thanking the building committee again for doing the due diligence on there. I am certainly not a construction guy and would not know how to begin to read those reports. So thank you for the time you put in on that. One of the public commenters referred to a more or less $3 million increase to fund the debt service on this. Could you remind us, I mean, how close was that commenter's input, or do we have actual estimates of what the relative mill rate increase would be for this? I know that was presented last time, but if you wouldn't mind just reminding everyone.
So I'll try to pull that up. I believe in the fiscal year 26-27 was when the debt service was going to peak, and we were going to see a little over $3 million increase. Let me see if I could pull this up. I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't anticipate that question.
Yeah.
I got to keep you on your toes, Al.
Yeah.
Mayor, it's called the Torrington _new THS debt mill rate impact study from the 20th of May.
Okay. So, and I will forward this or send it to the Board of Finance again. And I think this will probably become part of the dialogue and the public information also the Board of Education will be having going forward. But yeah, it was in the 27-28 fiscal year, the mill rate that would be attributable to the school project would be 3.23.
Right. And
so yeah,
that was disclosed, and thank you for having that on the tip of your tongue. I remember it being presented, and I remember looking at it, but I didn't have the exact number in front of me. And you know, ultimately, you know, I think it's pretty clear that a lot of us on this board are very sensitive to mill rate increases, but it makes sense that this goes through the referendum process because ultimately it is for the city to decide. You know, I know there's been a lot of discussion as to when the referendum should be held. Sorry, there's a little traffic on Main Street, but that ultimately is left to the best practices, and we create these building committees to do their jobs, and I feel comfortable that they have, and I appreciate the time they put in there. Ultimately, we'll see what the city thinks, and you know, if the city supports the project, it'll definitely move forward. The cost of it is substantial, and I don't think anyone has understated or belabored that point too much. But I do remember when I was at THS, it was under construction then, and it's still under construction now. And at some point, you do, at least in my opinion, you do need to call it. You know, you just need to start over and fix it. But I guess my point is to keep the meeting moving. If no one else has any other questions, it does make sense to put this in front of the town and see what the city and the residents think. You know, I'll trust the committees to schedule it when it's appropriate. And the only thing I would ask, and this might be outside of my realm as a Board of Finance member, is many of the questions and the public comments struck me as surprised. And I do know, you know, Mr. Kisko had submitted an email in one of the public comments saying, no one should have been surprised. We've been talking about this for a long time. So the only thing I would be asking or looking for or hoping for is just doing everything we can to make sure that we're putting this out there in front of the town to make sure everyone knows that the referendum is coming, what the details are, and really going over and above in this, socially distanced world that we're in now to make sure everyone has the information they need to make an educated decision when we take that referendum vote. I'm sorry to hear that people felt surprised by this, but it's not a new project. And I think we can do anything we can do as a city to make sure everyone has their information. I think that would be a huge help. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Pesky.
Having been at this education and building committee kind of stuff for 30 plus years, the discussion of when to have the referendum and have it being separate from an election, when we're looking at what's going to be this being a presidential election and being a fairly momentous presidential election, I would think that being able to have this referendum separate from the November ballot, either being before or after, it might not, for me, it's very important that it be separate, so that the focus can be on the building. I know the numbers would be less probably, because I would anticipate that we're going to see a lot of people voting in the presidential election. But I don't think that those same people are necessarily going to pay attention to a lot of the building committee information. And that's going to be a challenge to the building committee. If we have it before, that might not be necessarily such a bad thing, because we know a lot of that right after Labor Day is when a real lot of the presidential election stuff is going to get really, really strong. So that the September date, while it seems very close, it would allow a lot of information to get out prior to November into the election. And so it's just an experiential kind of perspective that I'm bringing to the date. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll check. I know that this board doesn't have to decide what that referendum date is, but I'll check, and perhaps Carol, through your office, you can actually find it for me. I'm not sure if our charter requires that there be a percentage of the voting public that actually votes on a referendum. I know for items like a forced referendum, we are required to have at least 15% of the voting public turn out for that to be an approved referendum. I'm not sure if this kind of referendum would fall under the same guidance. So I will definitely get clarification on that before the council, because the council actually is the one that decides the referendum date. And if this wasn't a pandemic, if we weren't talking about all those modifications for an election, for a primary in August, I wouldn't even be reluctant to say, we could certainly get 15% of our voters out for this. It's just, we just have to work a little bit harder to make sure that that happens. So, Mr. Wright.
I respectfully have a difference of opinion with Ms. Pesky on that particular order. I just think that the more people that show up, the better chance you have of getting a truly representational vote of the taxpayers of Torrington. I really feel you need that. The September date, there's nothing wrong with that. A separate date is a wonderful thing. I just think you have everybody coming out in November. If they're pushing it and promoting it adequately for September, it's going to be adequately pushed for November. Those who choose to vote are having the opportunity to vote. I just feel strongly that you need the most people. I'm just really convinced that the referendum is to reach the most people. That's and then most people will turn out and vote on the election day. Everything my political science career tells me that.
All right, if there are no other questions to the motion, or anything else that the superintendent, Mr. Boynton, one more.
I was just gonna agree with Mr. Wright. You know, one of the concerns that I have is no matter how much outreach we do, the perception is, well, you vote on election day. And I think even if we do a ton of outreach and let everybody know that, hey, this is happening before the presidential election, I don't think that message is really going to be heard. People are expecting to make a vote for their region and for their country on a certain day. And I don't think it's asking too much. And coupling in with some of the safety concerns that Mr. Bayes pointed out, I don't see why we would do this twice.
Yeah, I'll go back just to concur with Mr. Wright, Mr. Boyne. I still feel the same way about the date. So I definitely would like to see the referendum happen. And, you know, and if the taxpayers are educated properly, you know, then they may or may not pass it. But I still think November is the date that I'd like to see. Obviously, it's ultimately up to the council. It's not up to us. But that would be my recommendation to the council.
All right. Last call for questions or anything that's, Mr. Wright.
I just need a clarity on the procedure here, Mrs. Mayor. If I vote against this for the what's the next procedure if I vote against this? What happens next if it doesn't carry?
Well, if the Board of Finance did not approve the resolution to make the appropriation, then it wouldn't move forward. I mean, this Board of Finance must approve, for this to move forward, must approve the resolution for the bonding and borrowing. And at this point, that's all that's
and the
being,
referendum date is part of the
council's decision. Yeah. So your recommendation is strictly to agree to the appropriation, and then a recommendation that the council move forward with their resolution.
And Mayor, just a clarity real quick, if the referendum, if the voters turn this down, then basically our decision here today is null and void.
Yes, it would be. And I would think that the day after that referendum, there would probably be a reconvening of the Board of Ed and the various city boards to figure out all right, so what do we do next? Because I don't think there's any question in anybody's mind that the high school, something needs to happen. The high school is in desperate need of improvement. So, but yeah, if the voters vote this down, then we really need to start thinking about what next. What do we do next? And I don't mean to speak for the Board of Ed, but if Sue or Fiona wanted to chime in.
That's correct. That's exactly what we would do.
Yeah, so we don't have an option to do nothing. So if this does not pass, we will have to go back to the drawing board. We would prefer to not have to do this in any kind of emergency situation, but rather be planning, thoughtful in our process, and not be put in a position where we have to make rash decisions to make fixes up there that are long overdue before all of our times, but in desperate need. And I also think it's very important that people understand what was done at different points of trying to fix the high school, because there wasn't really a renovation. So we want to make that clear in our community meetings also, so that people understand what actually was done. You know, those are the original windows at the high school. People don't understand that there's a lot of things that people may think a lot of the stuff has been done, but there's so much work to be done up there, as you can see by the quote of what it would cost to just do the major maintenance items. So it's very concerning. So I think we have to go in some direction to move forward to decide as a town what we're going to do. The maintenance items are going to cost us more than a new building. So I think it's important that everyone realizes that. We're not talking about $5 million of maintenance that needs to be done up there. It's an entire overhaul. But the custodians, our director of facilities, they're fabulous, but they can't pin this together for much longer. So we're going to have to make some movement on this. And if it's not through a new school, we're going to have to look at a capital plan to start addressing these maintenance items. So the other big concern I have is we have one high school. So if some of these major things like the eroding pipes in the ceiling, you know, what do we do if something gets to a point where we've got to shut that school and move those kids? So it's just, there's a lot of concerns that I think we can't talk about this for 10 more years. We've been talking about it for a lot of years. So I hope that once people understand the issues that are at that school, that we can move forward and, you know, make the best of the money that we're going to have to spend anyways.
Fiona, it's Chris Bayes. Just to be clear, that 112 million for the maintenance piece, that's maintenance of the existing building plus a middle school, though, correct?
No.
That is only the high school.
That is just touching the high school and no construction of a new middle school. That's keeping the same middle school. And I didn't know, so I just wanted some clarification.
So the maintenance is actually that $112 million is just the maintenance items that needs to be done at the high school. It's no other building. It's just maintenance. It wouldn't be a renovation, wouldn't be built new. It would just be fixing what's wrong at the high school.
Okay, so the 112 million would be strictly just fixing the existing building that's there.
Fixing like the electrical, the plumbing, the corroding pipes, the windows, the roof, the gym structure.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be cool. That's all. I just didn't want any confusion if that was a middle, building, if that was building.
Can I ask a quick question? Because I think you just confused me. So it's 112 to renovate and it's 84 to build brand new?
No, so you have three options. You have the maintain, the renovate, and the build as new.
Right.
The maintain is not doing any renovation or building a new building. That's what the cost is going to be to fix the things that are wrong at the high school now.
Right.
So the reimbursement, only some of those items, if you're doing it as a maintenance, qualify for reimbursement. So the cost is much greater to Torrington to do those things through maintenance projects versus a renovation or a build as new.
Okay.
So
I was looking at the total number. Okay. I just my mind went in a different direction there. So thanks for the clarification.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona.
All right, so if there are no questions, I'm seeing that our zoning enforcement officer is waiting to start his meeting, which started at 6:30. So if there are no questions, this is a roll call vote. I'll again remind you what the motion was. This is to adopt resolution number 143-203, authorizing an appropriation of $159,575,000 for the construction of a new high school, a new middle school, a new central office, administrative office, said that twice, and demolition of the existing Torrington High School, and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the city and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $159,575,000, therefore, and to recommend approval of resolution number 143-204 to the Board of Council. Motion made and seconded. Roll call vote. Ms. Pesky?
Aye.
Mr. Bayes?
Aye.
Mr. Wright?
Nay.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Boynton?
Hey,
Did I miss
I
anything?
don't think the cost, I don't think I fully understand the cost of this enough.
Okay.
We're
So-
looking, the numbers seem out of whack.
So I heard 3 yays and 2 nays. The motion carries. There being no further business before the board and another board queued up for their next meeting, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Anderson moved.
Second.
Thank you. Motion made by Mr. Wright, seconded by Mr. Boynton. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion. All right. Thank you all very much, and thank you to the Superintendent, Board of Ed, and their team.
Thank you, Mayor.